everyone, welcome to the Hindu Current Affairs for Beginners. Before starting our today's session, first let us see answers for the questions from our yesterday's video. The first question is narrow banking means. Here first let us see about this concept called as narrow banking. Here the narrow banking means, here narrow in the sense it doesn't mean narrow in terms of activity, but here the banking will be done in a narrow way in engaging their funds. So what will happen here is the bank will place the funds it receives under risk-free assets. That means they will use the funds they get in the form of deposits. They get funds, they uses these funds and they will lend it or invest it only in risk-free assets. That is known as narrow banking. It is not all the funds they will use and invest them in the risk-free assets. A certain amount of these funds will be placed in risk-free assets in order to avoid this asset liability mismatch. And there is a committee known as Tariffs Committee. This committee has suggested this concept of narrow banking as a solution to address this problem of non-performing assets, which we have seen so many times in our video. So this is one solution provided by this Tariffs Committee to address this problem of non-performing assets. So now let us see our statements. It is the banking that accepts only deposits but does not give loans. This statement is incorrect. Here they accept both deposits and they will also provide loans. The next thing is banking is restricted to few areas. No, this is also incorrect. This is the banking that recognizes only few customers. Even this is incorrect. The thing is they will invest their funds in risk-free instruments. So now the answer here is D, none of the above. The next question is consider the following statements. Only the money, here only the money spent by the candidate need to be reported to the Election Commission of India but not the party spending. This statement is incorrect because yesterday we have seen that according to Representation of People's Act of 1951, a candidate should lodge an account of his expenses in the elections. See, here we used the term he should lodge an account, but we didn't say that he should report. Here we have given the question that they need to be reported. When it comes to reporting thing, both the political party as well as the candidate, they should report to the Election Commission of India regarding their expenses during the election. Whereas only the candidate has to lodge an account with the Election Commission of India about his or her expenses. So the statement 1 is incorrect. The next statement is Election Commission of India enforces poll money limits through the Model Code of Conduct. Even this is incorrect because the Election Commission of India will set a money limit, poll money limit based on RPA Act of 1951 and Election Conduct of Rules of 1961. As per these two, the Election Commission of India will set these poll limits but not through the Model Code of Conduct. As both the statements were incorrect here, the answer here is D, none of the above. Now let's see our today's session. These are all the topics that we are going to cover in our today's video. Our first article is IAF plane shot down, pilot taken captive by Pakistan Army. This article comes under GS paper 2 under the topic of international relations and also under GS paper 3 under the topic of internal security. From this article, here we should know about this Geneva Convention. What is this Geneva Convention is all about? This Geneva Conventions, they are a set of international treaties to regulate, that is to control war crimes. And our country, India, is a signatory to this Geneva Convention. This convention consists of 4 conventions and 3 protocols. The aim of this Geneva Convention is to incorporate human behavior even with the people who are involved in either international or non-international conflicts. This Geneva Convention promotes ethical behavior during wars, and it defines the code of conduct that must be followed while behaving with the criminals. It also consists of common articles which all the signatory countries should stick to those articles, and it establishes some guidelines to treat war prisoners. Here, according to this Article 3, this is one article that is related to how the prisoners of war should be treated. So to put it simply, that we can say these Geneva Conventions are the standards of international law for humanitarian treatment in war. It makes it mandatory on the parties, that is on the countries who are involved in the war, to incorporate human behavior while dealing with the non-combatants like civilians and medical personnel, and also with the combatants during a war situation, like combatants in the sense like prisoners of war or the people who were wounded during these hostilities. Here it was very clearly given that according to Article 3, the prisoners of war, they should be treated, and what are the things that has to be avoided. Here there should be no violence to the life and person in particular, and murder, mutilation, cruel treatment and torture, taking of hostages, outrages upon personal dignity in particular, and humiliating, degrading treatment. All these should be avoided according to Article 3 of the Geneva Convention. The next article is AP gets new South Coast Railway Zone. This article comes under GS Paper 3 under the topic of economy, and the subtopic here is infrastructure. From the prelims point of view, what is important from this article is, here we should know about this South Coast Railway Zone. The Indian Railways is going to create a new railway zone named as South Coast Railway in Andhra Pradesh, with its headquarters at Visakhapatnam, and this is going to be the 18th railway zone in the country. Till now we had 17 zones, and now this is going to be the 18th one. And this South Coast Railway Zone comprises of the existing Guntakal, Guntur and Vijayawada divisions that fall under South Central Railway. This separate railway zone was created as per one of the key promises that were made to Andhra Pradesh in the Bifurcation Act, as per item 8 of Schedule 13, which talks about infrastructure of Andhra Pradesh in AP Reorganization Act of 2014. The next article is no major fires break out in Bandipur forest. This article comes under GS Paper 3 under the topic of environment, and it also comes under GS Paper 3 under the topic of disaster management. From this article, what is important here is we should know about this concept known as forest fires. And from the prelims point of view, from this article, we should know about where is the location of this Bandipur Tiger Reserve. This Bandipur Tiger Reserve is situated in Karnataka, and this national park, it is also a national park and tiger reserve. It forms part of Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve, and it is surrounded by a river known as Kabini in the north, and river Moyer in the south, and river Nugu runs through the park. Now let's see about this concept known as forest fires. This thing will deal about in disaster management topic. Recently there is a major fire broke out in Bandipur Tiger Reserve, a national park in Karnataka, resulting hundreds of acres of forest area has got destroyed in the fire, and the fire even has spread to the core area. These forest fires, they pose a threat not only to the forest wealth but also to the wildlife by disturbing the biodiversity and the ecology and environment of a region. During summer, when there is no rain for months, these forests, they'll become littered with dry leaves, which could burst into flames if ignited by the slightest spark. These forest fires will cause imbalances in nature and endangers the biodiversity by reducing faunal and floral wealth. So if we see, what is important is, here we should know what are the causes for those forest fires. There are two causes. One is natural and the other one is anthropogenic or man-made reasons. So under the natural causes, the reasons are like lightning, which will set the trees on fire, high atmospheric temperatures and low humidity were the favorable conditions for a fire to start. Now if we see what are these man-made reasons, they are like flame, cigarette, electric spark or any source of ignition. And recently we have seen in the paper, when we are seeing about this Bandipur forest fires only, tourism was also mentioned as one of the reason. Even tourists were using these cigarettes, which is also a cause for these forest fires. And when it comes to the northeastern regions, this concept called as shifting cultivation is also the reason for these forest fires. The next article is 3D maps to assess risk to coastal areas from tsunami storms. This article comes under GS paper 3 under the topic of disaster management. This article is saying about the risk assessment to the coastal areas. The 9 coastal cities were Puri, Kakinada, Machilipatnam, Nizampatnam, Tuticorin, Rameshwaram, Chennai on the east coast and Alappuzha and Kochi on the west coast. So there is going to be a mapping for multiple hazard vulnerable mapping on these coastal cities, and it is being done by INCOIS. So from this article we should know what is this INCOIS. INCOIS is an autonomous organization. It is an independent organization of union government functioning under the Ministry of Earth Sciences, and it is a unit of Earth System Science Organization established in 1999, and it is headquartered in Hyderabad. The responsibility of this INCOIS is to provide best possible ocean information and provide advices to the government agencies, society, industry and scientific community through their continuous ocean observations and constant improvements through systematic and focused research on oceans. This is what is the purpose of this Indian National Center for Ocean Information Services. The next article is Modify Forest Dwellers Eviction Order Center. This article comes under GS paper 3 under the topic of environment and also under GS paper 2 under the topic of governance. The background of this article is recently the Supreme Court has asked the 17 state governments to evict nearly 1 million tribal and other households living in forests after their claims of right to live in forest were rejected under the Forest Rights Act of 2006. So from the present point of view, what is important for us to know is basics about this Forest Rights Act of 2006. This act is concerned with the rights of forest dwelling communities, their rights over land and other resources. What are the rights these forest dwelling communities were having on forest land and the resources of forest? And this act will provide them legal recognition to the rights of traditional forest dwelling communities. So what are the rights this act will provide is title rights, use rights. Use rights is towards using this minor forest produce like grazing the areas and pastoralist routes, all these. And it will provide relief and development rights, that is for rehabilitation in case of illegal eviction or forced displacement. And it also provides the forest management rights to protect forests and wildlife. So these are all the rights that will be provided under this act. And the other thing what is important from this article is our India's Forest Rights Act of 2006 is in line with several international conventions. They are the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, which recognizes the equal rights of a family Our India is signatory to this. And there is another convention that is concerned with indigenous and tribal population. This convention seeks to protect ownership rights of population over the lands they traditionally occupy. Even our Forest Rights Act is also talking about that. It is going to grant legal recognition to the rights of traditional forest dwelling communities. And the other thing is Declaration on Rights of Indigenous People. It protects the rights of indigenous people to lands, territories and resources which they traditionally own, occupy and use. India is even a signatory to this. And there is a convention on biological diversity which talks about preserving the indigenous knowledge and practices. The other thing is Rio Declaration on Environment and Development, which proclaims indigenous people, the people who are from the country, have a vital role in the environmental management. We have seen about this fourth right, which is known as forest management rights, to protect forests and wildlife under this Forest Rights Act. This is in line with this Rio Declaration on Environment and Development. And as per this Forest Rights Act, what is the eligibility to get these rights? People who were residing in the forests and who depends on forest and forest land for their livelihood, only their rights will be recognized. And also, the person who is claiming for these rights should be a member of scheduled tribe, that is scheduled in that particular area, or he must be residing in that forest area for 75 years. Then only they can claim these rights and they are eligible for getting these rights. Then what is the process that is followed to recognize these claimants? This act has a provision that there will be a Grama Sabha or village assembly which will initially pass a resolution recommending whose rights to which resources should be recognized. So it is this Grama Sabha which will recommend the eligible people to get these rights. And this resolution will be screened and approved at the level of subdivision or known as taluka. And later it will be screened at the district level. These screening committees, they consist of 3 government officials. One is from the forest official and the other one is revenue and tribal welfare department official. And 3 elected members of local body at that level. And this committee will also hear the appeals. Once they approve it, then the claimant can get rights towards this forest. The next article is claiming Arunachal. This article comes under GS paper 2 under the topic of governance, and the subtopic here is government policies and interventions for development in various sectors. From this article, from the prelims point of view, what we need to study is we should know about this PRC, what is this meaning and why it is issued. If we see the context of this article first, there is a violence in Arunachal Pradesh over this issue of permanent residence certificate to 6 non-Arunachal Pradesh scheduled tribes who were living in Namsai and Changlang districts and to the Ghorkas who were living in Vijayanagar. Here it was very clearly given that who are all those 6 non-Arunachal Pradesh scheduled tribes. They are Dioris, Sonoval Kacharis, Morons, Mishings, Adivasis and ex-servicemen who were belonging to Gorkha community. These people were demanding for this permanent resident certificate. And most of these communities, they were recognized as scheduled tribes in the neighboring Assam state. And these people were demanding for this PRC since so long, but it is being opposed by the powerful groups. So now let us see the details of this PRC, Permanent Residence Certificate. The state government of Arunachal Pradesh will issue domicile certificate, which is also known as permanent residence certificate, to the residents of the state who were staying in that state since a period, over a period of time. Those citizens who are not even residing in the state at present, but they are sure of permanently staying in Arunachal Pradesh. That means who are currently residing in some other states, maybe for work or for education, but they belong to Arunachal Pradesh, they can also apply for this permanent residence certificate. Along with this permanent residence certificate, this Arunachal Pradesh also offers temporary residence certificate for the people who reside in the state on a temporary basis. The purpose of this certificate, or what are the benefits they can avail with this, is this PRC is considered as a legal document which will serve as an evidence of residence, and it must be submitted wherever a residence proof is required in Arunachal Pradesh, and it should be produced in many situations, like when there is an admission in educational organizations, job reservations under specific quotas, especially for government jobs, and to get some local preferences, and even for applying ration card. This permanent residence certificate is very important and it's mandatory, and to avail the provisions of various welfare schemes of the state or to claim scholarships of the state, this permanent residence certificate is very essential. This is the reason why these 6 non-Arunachal Pradesh scheduled tribes were seeking for this. They were demanding for this permanent residence certificate. The next article is Tailing a Virus. This article comes under GS paper 2 under the topic of issues related to health. From this article, what is important for us to know is about this Zika virus. We know that Zika virus disease is a mosquito-borne virus transmitted by Aedes aegypti mosquitoes, which also transmit other vector-borne diseases like chikungunya, dengue and yellow fever. It is the same mosquito which is responsible for even these diseases also. And this was first identified in Zika forest in Uganda, that is in Africa, from where it has got its name called as Zika virus. This virus is transmitted by infected Aedes aegypti mosquitoes, who also transmits this dengue, and it will spread through blood transfusion and sexual contact. These two are the ways how this disease will get transmitted. And there will be symptoms like dengue, which include fever, skin rashes, conjunctivitis, muscle and joint pain, headache, all these. And the threats, once we get this Zika virus, the pregnant woman will be most affected. If they are infected this virus, they might give birth to babies with severe brain damage or with serious birth defects like some neurological disorders and fetal deformation, which is known as microcephaly. Microcephaly is the situation where infants are born with abnormally smaller heads. And right now there is no specific treatment or vaccine that is currently available to treat this virus, and the best form of prevention is to protect against mosquito bites and clear the stagnant water where the mosquitoes breed. The next article is The Vexatious Question of Masood Azhar. This article comes under GS paper 2 under the topic of international relations. From this article, here let us see about this United Nations Security Council. What is this? It is one of the principal organs, one of the 6 principal organs of United Nations, and it is charged with the responsibilities of maintaining international peace and security. This was established in 1946 as per Article 23 of Chapter 5 of United Nations Charter, and this council has 15 members, which were again categorized into 2 types. One is the permanent members and the other one is non-permanent members. In these permanent members, there are 5 members. They are China, France, Russia, UK and USA. These are the 5 permanent members, and there are 10 non-permanent members of this council, and these non-permanent members will have a term of 2 years. As it is one of the 6 key organs of United Nations and it is entrusted with the responsibilities of maintaining international peace and security, its powers include establishing peacekeeping operations and to establish international sanctions and authorizing military actions through the Security Council resolution. This is why we saw about even this 1267 resolution, United Nations Security Council, they will pass these resolutions in order to establish these international sanctions and authorize military actions. And it is the only United Nations body with the authority to issue binding resolutions to its member states. Whatever resolution that is issued by this UNSC, that is binding on the member states. And these permanent 5 members were having veto power while taking any decision. That means if any member out of these 5 members opposes for any decision, then that decision will not work out. The next article is a patchwork approach to GST problems. This article comes under GS paper 3 under the topic of economy. From this article, now we are going to see about few things like we have seen about this GST Council so many times. Now let us see it again. And what are the tax slabs that were there at present under this GST regime? And what is this concept known as input tax credit system? And we are also going to see about this National Disaster Response Fund, and we will look into this National Anti-Profiteering Authority and what are the new decisions taken by this GST Council. So now, first of all, what is this GST Council? As per Article 279A of the Indian Constitution, this GST Council was constituted. And it is the first federal institution of India as per this finance minister, because it includes both central and state governments while taking decisions. And it is responsible for approving all the decisions that are related to taxation in the country. And it includes center and the states. All 29 states were part of this along with 2 union territories. One is Delhi and the other one is Puducherry. So the decisions regarding these GST rates, that which good should fall under or which service should fall under which tax slabs. When this GST came into picture, there were only 5 tax slabs, that is 0%, 5%, 12%, 18% and 28%. Now these have got expanded. Here you can see that right now we are having 8 tax slabs. These 5 along with this 0.25% tax slab for rough diamonds and 3% for the gold, and the recent one, that is 1% tax slab for the sale of under construction affordable houses. So there are total 8 tax slabs. So who decides this is? It is this GST Council. They will take these decisions based on 2 methods. One is consensus. Consensus means they will mutually agree to one decision and they will take it. It is nothing but an agreement towards a decision. In case if there is any disagreement, then they will go for voting. In voting, the central government will have 33.33% of weightage, that is 1/3 of voting rights, and the state governments along with this Delhi and Puducherry, they have 66.67% voting weightage, which is nothing but 2/3 of voting rights. And these decisions will be taken after the majority in this council. And then the next concept is input tax credit system. We have seen about this so many times. Now let me brief about it. Input tax credit means when a manufacturer pays the tax on his output, then he can deduct the tax he had already paid on the input he had purchased. If we see this with an example, let me tell you the same example which I have used in one of our previous videos. The same. Let us take a garment firm who is producing a cotton shirt. And to produce a cotton shirt, they need the input known as cotton. And let us take this manufacturer, he had purchased this cotton at 100 rupees to manufacture a cotton shirt. Now, for purchasing this cotton at 100 rupees, he has to pay this central GST at 10% rate. Then he paid 110 rupees. This is the cost of his input. Now, he added some value to his input and he manufactured a cotton shirt. Now, he wants to sell this shirt. And the GST rate on this ready-made shirt is 12%. and this person wants to sell this shirt at 200 rupees. If 12% is a GST, then what will be the tax? The tax will be 24 rupees. But the thing is, out of this 200 rupees, for 100 rupees, he has already paid this 10 rupees tax. And he now added only 100 rupees value to this. Then he should pay only for this 100 rupees the tax, which is by exempting this 10 rupees, now he has to pay this 14 rupees as tax. Now while paying this 14 rupees, remaining 14 as tax, he can claim this input tax which he has already paid, which is known as input tax credit. So now what are the new rules means? Recently the government, this GST Council has exempted this real estate industry from this input tax credit system. Now their operations will not have a provision of this input tax credit system. Is it only the real estate industry which is exempted from this? No. Along with real estate industry, it is the restaurants and also sanitary pad industry. All these three were exempted from this input tax credit system. And the next thing is National Disaster Response Fund, NDRF. What is this? It is defined under Section 46 of Disaster Management Act of 2005, and it is a fund managed by the central government for meeting the expenses for emergency response, relief and rehabilitation due to any disaster. And this NDRF is constituted to supplement the funds of state disaster response funds of the states and to facilitate immediate relief in case of any severe calamities. And the next thing is this anti-profiteering concept, GST anti-profiteering. Let's understand this concept of anti-profiteering with an example. Let's say there is a tax rate on meals in the restaurants is reduced to 18% from the previous 20.5%. That means the food supplier should sell 100 rupees worth food item for 118 rupees now. Before he used to sell this 100 rupees worth food at 120.5 rupees. But now as the tax rates have reduced, he should also reduce the cost of his supply. So as per the anti-profiteering rules, this benefit of reduced tax rate should be passed on to the consumer in the form of this reduced price. The impact of reduced input costs should also be passed on. If it is not passed on, then that is called as profiteering, and in order to avoid this profiteering concept, an authority known as National Anti-Profiteering Authority was established to look into these things. As we have brought in this GST, and for many goods the tax rates have got reduced, but the manufacturers were not passing on those benefits to the consumers in the form of reduced price. So to look into these issues, this National Anti-Profiteering Authority was established. The next article is Manufacturing Unanimity. This article comes under GS Paper 2 under the topic of governance. Though this article is not of much importance for prelims, but it is important from the mains point of view. So this is all talking about some acts of these state governments is antithetical to the democracy. This is all talking about recently the Telangana and AP state governments, what they were doing is, for the sarpanchs who were being elected unanimously without any election process, for those panchayats, the Telangana state government is providing a cash grant. If the panchayat is of 15,000 population, then they are providing 10 lakh cash grant to that panchayat. And if it is above 15,000, 25 lakh worth cash grant is being provided by the state government. So this is being considered as, like it is distorting the democracy. What is the cornerstone of the democracy? In democracy, it is the people's choice which should prevail, and there has to be a competition. Then people should choose who is the best person. People should have the choice to select their representative. This is the cornerstone of the democracy, but this is not what happening here. The next article is need to change the narrative of Jingoism. From this article, now let us see what is meant by this Jingoism. It is extreme patriotism. Patriotism in its extreme form. In the form of an aggressive foreign policy and advocacy of conflict or violent methods in achieving the national interest at any cost. So we can say it is an aggressive nationalism which will translate into a feeling of superiority, particularly in military matters, and demands aggressive actions or conflicts to resolve even small differences with other countries. By using the methods like threatening the other nations, demeaning someone who is against a nation's ideology, and using this violence when there is a way for negotiation and resolution through peace talks. The next article is regulating drug prices. This article comes under GS paper 2 under the topic of governance, and the subtopic here is issues related to health. So this article is all talking about how the drug prices are regulated in the country. So there will be a list known as National List of Essential Medicines. There will be a list, and this list will comprise of all the essential medicines based on priority needs of the population, and it will be made with safety measures, and it comprises of disease prevalence and cost effective medicines will be included under this National List of Essential Medicines. And now, who will fix the prices for these medicines that were there in this list? It is the National Pharmaceutical Pricing Authority which will fix this prices, and it will do so based on an order known as Drug Prices Control Order of 2013. Based on these provisions of this order, the NPPA will decide the prices of these medicines. The next article is Center brings 42 non-scheduled cancer drugs under price control. When this article comes under GS paper 2 under the topic of governance. Here it is talking about the center has brought 42 non-scheduled cancer drugs under price control. So now let us see about this National Pharmaceutical Pricing Authority. It is an independent body under the Department of Pharmaceuticals functioning under Union Ministry of Chemicals and Fertilizers. What this authority does is it will fix or revise the prices of drugs and also their formulation, and it will enforce the prices and availability of medicines as per this drugs price control order of 2013. This authority is responsible for monitoring the prices of decontrolled drugs in order to keep them at reasonable levels, and it will fix even the ceiling price, the upper limit for these essential medicines that were listed in this National Essential Medicines list. The next article is India delays retaliatory tariffs levy on US goods. This comes under GS paper 3 under the topic of economy and effects of liberalization. This article is all about that India has notified higher tariffs on 29 items that were being imported from United States, and this was in retaliation against United States announcement on imposing tariffs on steel and aluminium items, that is 25% on steel and aluminium 10%, that is imported from all the countries except Canada and Mexico in order to compensate from the loss of their revenue. This is a step taken by US, and in retaliation India has decided to increase the tariffs on the 29 items that were being imported from United States, and these products include almonds, apples, chickpeas, lentils, walnuts, industrial inputs like the grades of iron and steel products, all these. Now India wants to extend the deadline for imposing these tariffs, these increased tariffs, to April 1st. Now let's see today's prelims questions. The first one is, for which among the following there is no provision of input tax credit? And the next question is, consider the following statements. Drug Pricing Control Order of 2013 is implemented by National Pharmaceutical Pricing Authority, and this DPCO provides for this National List of Essential Medicines, and all the essential drugs are brought under this National List of Essential Medicines list. Try to answer those questions and post your answers in the comment box. Tomorrow we'll see a detailed explanation for those questions. Thank you.